Welcome to Unbiased and On the Fence. This is Paranormal Frequencies, and we are live with our special guest tonight. Of course, Sherry's here with me, but we have our special guest tonight, Anthony Quinata. How are you doing tonight, Anthony?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Oh, doing wonderful, and I appreciate you coming on because this is such an interesting topic with the this famous, infamous doll, Harold the Haunted Doll. And it was featured actually on Ghost Adventures when they went to that Island of the Dolls episode, which was, I think Zach explained that as being one of his, I don't know, freakiest paranormal investigations of all 10 seasons or something like that, right?
Exactly. Yeah, he mentioned that. Aaron mentioned that as well. That it was one of actually Zach said it was the most terrifying investigation that he had done in 10 seasons.
That's wild. Well, yeah, when you see the doll, you can see why it's kind of eerie, you know. So I don't know, Sherry, did you want to start with just maybe the background or?
Well, I just had a little intro for Anthony. I wanted to thank him for being here. But Anthony Quinata is a psychic medium, paranormal investigator, and researcher, and has authored multiple books, including Harold the Haunted Doll. Hopefully, we can have him on often to dive deeper into each book that he's written and discover even more about Anthony's astonishing abilities.
That's awesome. So yeah, the dog's getting a little upset, huh?
Well, I've got two of them. He's the smallest, but he's like the big brother to all four. And
I understand.
he's trying to keep the one who keeps climbing into my lap in line.
Oh,
Which
so
is easy
sweet.
to do.
We welcome puppies around here.
Yeah, we got lots of animal lovers here. So.
Oh, nice.
Basically,
those-
I thought maybe we could start having you tell a little history on Harold and how the doll found its way into your reality, including the mailman's words upon delivery. I love that part.
Well, when it was originally listed, the guy who listed it wrote that he had found it at a flea market in Webster, Florida. And I just want to go on the record and say that that's completely untrue. Actually, I have he found it in his brother's apartment when he had to move in with his brother. I think it was 2002, 2003, that time period. And his brother had an eBay store, and Mishka, which is the name he's using, I don't really want to give out his real name, was interested. He was very entrepreneurial. He was a filmmaker. He was very creative. And he saw his brother's eBay store, and he thought, well, this is a great way, you know, to start a business without having to actually have a brick and mortar thing. And so he was looking around at his brother's things. His brother used to collect things from thrift stores and flea markets, but this was all in the Brooklyn area. And I believe it was Brooklyn. Anyway, and he found this doll, and he thought, well, I might be able to get $7 or $8 for it. But then he thought, you know, if I put a great story on here, I'd probably be able to get $30 or $40. And so he just started making all these crazy claims about it being haunted. And eventually the claims became more and more outlandish. And a woman who was a childhood friend of he and his brothers actually bought it for, I think, $295. And what's crazy is she knew that the stories were bogus. And he would make it clear to her, if you win this, you have to take the doll. And she said, her name was Kathy. She said, that's fine. I want to flip it based on its popularity and make $100 or so. So she paid $295, and I'll tell you how I know that in just a moment. And instead of flipping it, 2-3 months later, she ended up holding on to it for a year. And at the end of the year, she was convinced that it was cursed.
Wow.
So, in fact, when I first saw the doll, contrary to popular belief, I didn't believe a word that it said in the original listing for the doll. But I was we're going to write a book entitled Haunted eBay and subtitle it, Are You Going to Believe Me or Your Lying Eyes? And what I was going to do is I was going to take, different objects like a mirror, a painting, a doll, and quite a few things, actually.
Dubik boxes.
And, I'm sorry?
Dubik boxes.
Dubit boxes, you said?
Yeah. Oh, that's it. It's never mind. It's just something that people used to trap spirits in and tape them shut in.
Yeah.
They sell
Well,
them on
I mean, I
eBay
have
all
a
the
couple.
time.
I did buy a couple of those, and in all honesty, at that point in time, I was really thinking of just stopping buying anything, and then I saw a listing for the Dybbuk box, Jason Paul's Dybbuk box, which movie has been made out of, and at the end I was going to snipe it, and when I placed my bid, it actually this not only happened to me, it happened to several people. Jason told me the auction site didn't recognize my bid. And so anyway, I was kind of disappointed, and I thought, well, I'll just keep looking a little bit longer, and I finally found Harold the Haunted Doll, and there was a reserve on it. And to me, you put up a reserve, and I don't care if it's women's clothing. I'm going to bid on it because I'm just curious to see what the reserve is, right?
Yeah.
And so when I, put a bid of $300 on it, one, I was stunned to find out that the reserve was like $295. That's how I know how much Kathy paid for it, because she just wanted to get her money back. And secondly, within moments, I received an email from Kathy saying, why do you want this doll? And I said, well, in all honesty, I don't. I was just interested in your reserve. As soon as somebody outbids me, I'm out of here. I'm not going to bid anymore. And we chatted, and then she sent me another email that said, I don't believe the doll is haunted. I do believe it's cursed. And she told me why, because according to her, a couple of people who came into contact with the doll literally had mysterious deaths after that. One woman fell down a flight of stairs. Another guy who was staying with her and her fiance, who's now her husband, he was one of these health nuts. He ran marathons, he ate healthy, he ate clean. Before he came to live with Kathy and her husband Rick, or her fiance Rick, he went to Wales. Kathy was living in Dublin, and got himself a physical, got a clean bill of health. He moved in with Kathy and Rick. Unbeknownst to him, the doll was sitting in the closet in the room that he was in. And 4 months later, he died from stage 4 larynx cancer.
Wow.
Anyway, make a long story short as to how I ended up with the doll. As soon as I was chatting with Kathy, this guy who called himself Strange Magic wrote to me and said, don't bother bidding on the doll. I'll just outbid you. This doll is mine. And that just, sent my testosterone flying.
Oh, yeah, then it's on.
Yeah, I thought, it may be yours, buddy, but it's going to cost you. And I immediately thought, I'll just keep outbidding this guy until, the end of the auction, and I'll let him take it away. And as it happened, I think it was about 4 minutes before the auction ended, I put in a bid of $720.
Wow.
I expected him to, bid over that. And for the next 4 minutes, I just watched that clock tick down, and finally it said, congratulations, you're the owner. So,
oh my.
Kathy immediately wrote to me and said, look, I will let you out of this deal. If, you don't want to send me the money, you don't have to. And I wrote back to her, I said, what, a deal is a deal. I'll send you the money, you send me the doll. And so I sent her the money, and then she wrote to me and said, I will hold on to this doll for 2 weeks. And if at the end of the 2 weeks you decide you still want it, I'll mail it out to you. 2 weeks passed. I told her, go ahead and mail it. She took it to the Irish post office, and she watched them take the box, put it, in the sort bin to be taken away, was driving home. And on the news, she heard that the Ireland's postal service went on strike.
Oh my God.
And so she wrote to me. She said, "I knew I should have thrown that damn doll into the ocean." And 2 weeks later, it wasn't even 2 weeks later, I guess it was a week or so later, week and a half later, I was standing out in the front porch, and the mailman pulled up in his official USPS station wagon. He jumps out of the car and he goes, "Oh, there you are. I have a monster for you." And I was thinking, a monster? You know, maybe he had a large mirror or something like that. So I walked down to his car and looked inside and couldn't see any monster, couldn't see anything really large, but I did see a package from Dublin, Ireland, and I knew Harold had arrived.
Wow.
So, but again, going back, a lot of people are under the mistaken impression that it came from Webster, Florida, at a flea market, and it didn't. It came from Mishka's older brother's apartment, and several people haven't owned it since that auction that I wanted in. I've had it since 2004. There's just a lot of other nonsense going on the net to this day that people believe. So I wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, I'm glad you did, because you know, I'd always heard about the original story where it was bought for a little boy or something. None of that's nothing that you.
Yeah, no, it was never burned. Nobody ever tried to burn it. I've never tried to burn it. You know, to my knowledge, a priest never came, because keep in mind the original story that it was sold under was a hoax.
Okay.
Okay. Mishka admitted it was a hoax later on. Mishka thought that Kathy had lost her mind, you know, saying all the things she said. And then I wrote to him and I said, "Well, these are my experiences." And now to this day, you know, without having sat down and talked to him, I think he's pretty convinced something's going on. Because not only because of my experiences, the experiences other people have had, but, you know, the experiences Mishka's had as well. At one time, I fly out to Los Angeles quite frequently, and we're supposed to meet. I think it was in October. We're going to meet, and the day before I flew out, he wrote to me and said that we couldn't meet the next day because his mother had suddenly become ill, and she was fine one day. The next day, she had to go into the doctor, and I can't remember. She was there for 10 days. So then I was going out to Los Angeles again the following month in November, and I said, you know, let's get together. And he's like, "Sure, let me know when you're coming out." But this time I wasn't going to tell him when I was coming out. The day I flew in, his mother fell and broke her hip. Wow. And was in the hospital for like a month, I think. Oh. And then I was flying out again. This time I wasn't going to tell him. And, you know, I follow him on Facebook. And he eventually, I don't know at what point, but he was in Japan and having the worst luck he'd ever had in his entire life. So, you know, like I said, you know, I honestly think he was very creative. He, like I say, he was a filmmaker. And I think that he took some of the things that really happened in his real life and started attributing it to this doll. It caught fire literally around the world, and he just started building on it. And it became a story that just became so ridiculous that there was no way in the world I, you know, would have believed it was possible. But a year after having it, I put it away in storage from 2005 to 2013, convinced something was going on. I just didn't know what.
So what was some of the first things that happened with him?
Well, part of my plan in writing this book was to take each object and take it to a friend of mine, April Palmer, who was a psychometrist. She could take an object, hold it, and tell you the history of whoever owned it. And I brought her several things one day, and I had Harold for last. And I had it in a bag, and at that point in time, by that time, and it was very quickly after I owned it, because my own personal experience was, what I planned on doing was I planned on taking pictures, I planned on doing EVP work, I planned on doing like tri-field meter recordings and natural EM recordings, that sort of thing. And then finally, last but not least, I was going to take it to various psychics and have them tell me if they, you know, what they got, and if what they got matched what the owner said, I'd think, well, maybe there's something to this. And if it didn't, you know, I just kind of, whatever happened is what I was going to write about. Anyway, when I took Harold out of the bag I had it in, she said, "Oh, you have Harold." And I said, "Yeah, you know about Harold?" She says, "Oh, yeah, he's all over the internet." Well, I almost put the doll back in the bag because I thought I wanted a clean reading. I wanted her to read things she knew nothing about. And it's obvious she had been reading about Harold the entire time he was online. And I decided to go ahead and let her do it. And I brought out the crucifix that I had, which I think it was, well, it was several years later. I found it. I used to keep it in front of Harold. And then one day I found it broken in half. It was a wooden crucifix. Found it broken in half on the floor. And at the time, I lived alone in a hotel room, I should say, not a motel, hotel room. So I took the crucifix out, and I took out a bottle of holy water. I'm Roman Catholic, and I started sprinkling the doll with holy water. And she started laughing, and she said, "You're sprinkling the doll with holy water?" And I said, "Yeah, well, better safe than sorry." Then I handed her the doll, and she started to do a reading on it. And I think it was literally less than 90 seconds later. She said, "Anthony, I can't do this anymore." She handed the doll back to me, and I said, "Why?" And she said, "Because I have a heart murmur, and the doll just threatened to kill me."
Oh my God.
And I remember thinking, I had known her for about 8 years, and I knew her to be a bit on the dramatic side. And I thought, well, you know, this is just plain silly. You know, you have a heart murmur, and this doll's threatening to kill you. So I took it back and, you know, took it home, and I started listening to the recording that I had made of everything she was reading that day. And then we got to Harold, and I heard her say, when I brought out the holy water, started sprinkling the doll with holy water, you know, I heard her say, "You're sprinkling the doll with holy water," and she chuckled. And I said, "Yeah, better safe than sorry." And over all that, you could hear a man screaming in agony. That's the best way I can describe it. Almost like he was on fire. And then when she said, "You're sprinkling the doll with holy water," and chuckled, I heard a voice say, "Shut up, you bitch."
Wow.
Then, as she was doing the reading, I heard a man say, "I'm going to kill you, you bitch." And then a moment later, she said, "He just threatened to kill me. I have a heart murmur. Feels like he's grabbing my heart." Shortly after that, I'll just skip over a few things. I talk about this extensively in my book. If I may just shamelessly plug that at this point.
Of course.
It's available on Amazon. I took the doll. I was trying to actually get a tarot card reading on it, and I couldn't find anybody who was willing to do a tarot card reading. I went to a psychic fair, and every time I show the doll to somebody, they'd be like, "No, I don't want to have anything to do with it." So I bought a 3 books and a tarot card deck. And one day I was trying to do a tarot card reading on my own, not knowing what I was doing. Mm-hmm. And a friend of mine, Angie, called and asked me what I was doing. And she said, "Well, I was thinking maybe you and I could go to lunch." I said, "Sure, come on by." She said, "I'll be there in 30 minutes. Well, Angie operates on Angie time. And shortly after I hung up, I just realized, I was really tired, needed to take a nap. And I was actually had the doll sitting at my dining room table. And I got up and left the doll at the dining room table, sitting on the dining room table, got up and went laid down. And I think it was about an hour and a half later, I heard her screaming bloody murder. And it took me a couple of seconds to wake up. And I said, "Angie, is that you?" And then she screamed, "Where are you?" And I went running out. And I found her literally plastered against the wall next to my front door. She pointed in the direction of the dining room and screamed, "Is that Harold?" And I thought, oh my God, I forgot to put Harold away. So I went I got him, put him away, came back out, and she was weeping. Just like I said, flat against the door next to my front door. And I said, "Are you okay?" And she told me that as soon as she pulled up on the driveway and got out of the car, she felt like she was in danger. You know, but she ignored it. She came, knocked on the door. I didn't answer. And, you know, my friends knew that they didn't even have to knock on the door. They could just walk on in. Well, she walked in and kept calling out for me and didn't see me, walked into the dining room, saw the doll sitting there looking at her like, "Wow, the peas were good. Do you have any carrots?" or something along those lines. And she immediately turned and bolted for the front door. She said it felt like somebody was stopping her from leaving the door. She felt it was like somebody was holding her. That's when she ended up against the wall and started screaming. And she asked me this crazy question: "Are my kids okay?" And I said, "Well, why would you ask that?" She said, "I don't know. I just felt like my kids were in danger." One of the first things that April said as soon as she held the doll was, it felt like it belonged to either a child molester or a molested child.
Wow.
So anyway, one more quick story. I found somebody, a friend of mine, Diane, and her actual video is on YouTube. She told me she could do tarot card reading. So I said, "Would you mind?" She's like, "No, bring it over." So I went over to where she worked. We locked ourselves into a conference room, and she did a tarot card reading. At least that's what, you know, it was supposed to be. It turned out to be a lot of gobbledygook, as she puts it. In other words, it didn't make any sense at all. But I was recording that as well, and we were listening to the recording. And out of the corner of my eye, I saw her scratching with her right hand, her left hand between her thumb and her forefinger, like this. And then she said, "What the fuck?" And she said, "Anthony, does this look like a bite mark to you?" And I remember thinking, I saw you. You know, you're not putting anything past me. I saw you scratching your hand. She held her hand out, and there were 2 indentations. I mean, literal indentations in her hand. And I tried putting the same indentations in my hand, couldn't do it. So I found a stir stick and a Sharpie pen. I marked the indentations on her hand, held it up to the doll's teeth, and they matched exactly.
Wow.
So we were wigging out about that. We went and told a couple of her coworkers about it. And one of her coworkers said, "Diane, who hit you in the face?" And Diane said, "What are you talking about?" She said, "It looks like somebody punched you in the face." And right under her left eye, she remembers it as being under her right eye, but I know it was under her left because she was sitting here with her right side to me. I had to go around. Her face was swelling. I held up the hand of the doll to the swelling, and it matched perfectly. Now, here's the crazy thing. A lot of people, when they see the doll, they complain of headaches and backaches typically. There have been other things, but typically headaches and backaches. And Diane refused to say the doll's name anytime we talked. She, didn't want to talk about the doll. She never read any of my blogs, never watched any of my YouTube videos. But one day she saw on Facebook that I was doing an interview, so she decided to listen to it. And then she heard me mention that a lot of people, after seeing the doll, even just a picture of it, would complain of a headache or a backache. And she called me the next day and told me that shortly after our meeting, she had a pain in the upper middle part of her back. And she had just gone to see a doctor like a month before to find out what was going on, and found out that her back, one of the discs in her back was deteriorating in a very rare spot, because it was in a part of her back that was immovable. And he told her that within a short period of time, and this was, I think, a year or two ago, it seems to me it was like a year and a half ago, she would end up wheelchair bound. and there was nothing that he could do about it. So she, you know, when we were on the phone, she said, "Do you think it had to do with Harold?" And I said, "Honey, it wouldn't surprise me, and I'm sorry." So at this point, she might be wheelchair bound, actually.
Wow. I know when I first found Anthony's channel, I was so interested, and I was kind of binge watching these videos, and my son was picking on me about it, and so he grabbed his sister's doll and was, you know, throwing it around and doing weird things to it and laughing at me. And so he throws the doll up on the desk, and he put his, or up on a dresser, and put his iPhone in front of it, because I was watching you with the flashlight communication with Harold, and he did that, and he started asking questions, and it was getting answered and everything. And
Oh,
yeah, and we made a video of it, and it's not on my channel because it was an old phone, but I didn't link it or nothing because it has a lot of cussing and stuff in it, but because we're crazy. But anyway, long story short, afterwards I contacted Anthony because my son, he's never had pimples or anything, and he broke out with this rash all over his face, and it was like weeping and everything, and we had creams and doctor appointments, everything to get it cleared up, and it like took forever. And I just had this feeling that it could have been connected. It was really weird.
now, like I said, usually backaches or headaches, and there's a reason for that actually. But other people have complained of similar things, like when the show appeared, or when the doll appeared on Ghost Adventures, the Island of the Doll episode. I heard from people from all over the world, you know, writing me, telling me that they were watching the show. One woman, actually, I don't remember how she contacted me. I perhaps gave her my phone number after listening to it. And she and her fiance and her best friend and her fiance were all watching the show together. And, you know, they were mocking it. You know, they were saying, you know, what a load, you know, this is a bunch of bullshit and all that other stuff. And all of a sudden her fiance, if I remember right, he started coughing up blood.
Wow.
And he jumped up and ran to the bathroom, and her best friend's fiance jumped up to make sure he was okay. And while he was, you know, standing over there, you know, asking him what was going on, all of a sudden she said that it felt like somebody hit him in the stomach. Well, they were both rushed to the emergency room. And according to her, now I did ask for medical records, you know, proving what they were claiming. But according to her, her fiance suffered from a ruptured larynx, and her best friend's fiance had colitis, which apparently will never go away now. So,
wow. That's something. Man.
So a lot of times on the show we talk about the power of intention and stuff like that. Do you think, being that this started as a hoax to begin with, but then like a lot of people put energy into it and felt fear, and you know, do you think somehow the thought forms can collect and become make something out of nothing? That, you know, so maybe it started as a hoax, but just, you know, people putting so much energy into it being this real spooky sort of thing empowered it to become such a thing. Is that kind of where you're at with this whole thing?
I used to think that, or I used to wonder that at least. But one thing that I've learned, and I talk about this in my book, in fact, it's the main thesis of my book. I did not, if you would have asked me, you know, do you believe that there's a demon involved? And nowadays, I think that Hollywood has scared the daylights out of people with ghosts, so now they're onto this whole demonic thing, right? I would have told you, no, I don't. Even though, again, I'm a Roman Catholic, I was actually taught in seminary that the devil doesn't exist. It was a medieval concept, and it was a part of our psyche.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, it was the dark part of our psyche. And so literally up until about 2 years ago, I would have said, you know, no, I don't believe there's a demon involved. Now I do believe there's a demon involved. Okay. And there's a couple of reasons for that. And I'll show you part of why I believe that. But what I think the reason why it was portrayed as a hoax, or the reason why it was done up as a hoax, is because there's an old saying that the devil's greatest trick was convincing you he wasn't real. Okay? So I believe that's why the original listing was a hoax, because it's often, that used to be thrown against, against me all the time. Well, the guy who originally listed it was a hoax. I mean, admits it was a hoax. So, you're really just, lying to people too to get them to buy your book. And I'm just like, I don't care if you buy my book or not. I'm not getting rich off this book. Okay. But I'm telling you, there's something going on. And I do believe that what's going on is demonic. People who aren't familiar with the doll, like, for instance, the very first two guys who had a paranormal group were totally unfamiliar with the doll. I mean, they knew something about it, but when they came to do the investigation, quote unquote, they called it a preliminary investigation. And their name was, or they called themselves Paranormal Lockdown. No, Lockdown Paranormal, pardon me. Lockdown Paranormal, because they're both a couple of deputy sheriffs and they were stationed in a jail. So they'd lock people down. And, they didn't know anything about the doll. I didn't tell them anything about the doll. And they came in, and then they had an ovilus, and they did EVP stuff. And then they said, we're going to go examine the evidence, and we'll get back to you in a couple of weeks and set up a formal investigation. And while the lead investigator was reviewing the evidence, one of the questions he asked, well, one of the things in their link, it's still online, and I actually just posted something, but you can find it in if you look up Haunted Harold or Harold the Haunted Doll on YouTube, you can find their what they posted about it. But you hear several screams, and at one point he says, who are you? And the response was, none of your damn business. And a moment later, he told me he felt like he had been hit in the back of the head and in the middle of his back with a baseball bat simultaneously, and he literally ended up in the emergency room for a couple of days. They will not, this is when I was living in Denver, Colorado, they would not come within 10, 15 miles of the doll after that. They kind of wished me well in writing. And, if we had a mutual friend, and our mutual friend Colleen said they don't want to see the doll ever again. They're terrified of it. And again, that's to answer your question, is because of the collective. I don't think so, to be honest with you. I think that there's an entity in the doll who, is now known as Harold. And the name Harold was actually given to the doll by Mishka and his brother. And then there is a demon, if you'll hang on one second, who actually owns the doll. And I discovered all that after the Ghost Adventures episode. When people started, looking up the doll online and then started contacting me with experiences they were having. Several experiences, even though, again, these people didn't know each other, and I sure as hell wasn't broadcasting what they were saying. There were several people whose experiences lined up and continue to, or people continue to have similar experiences to this day.
Wow, that's crazy.
Well, it is.
At first, wasn't you thought that maybe it was somebody that was like, trapped or whatever, and then because you were trying to like kind of be positive about it at first. I noticed as it went on until that like got revealed, but then like in the end, didn't you like tell? I don't know if you want to skip to that part yet about like when you took him to the church and all that stuff. Probably not yet, huh?
Yeah, I can talk about that certainly. But what happened was, I was on another radio show. Kathy, who I bought the doll from, contacted me and said, would you like to talk about the doll? And up till that point, I really hadn't. I mean, you guys are only in the second interview I've done in a year and a half. And I said, I'll do it on one condition. And she said, what's that? I said, that you will be on the show with me when I'm being interviewed. And I want you to admit you knew that the listing was a hoax. And, of course, she was a bit hesitant about it. And I said, look, you and I both know there's something going on here. But if I have you on and you don't admit it's a hoax, people are going to wonder. And she said, okay. So she got on, and to her credit, she admitted she knew it was a hoax and that she wanted to cash in on the popularity and all this other stuff. But a couple of weeks later, I got a call from the host of the show asking me if I knew who Zach Bagans was. And I said, yeah, I know who he is. And she told me that Bagans was wanting to go down to the Island of the Dolls and was hoping to take Robert the Doll with him. But he told Bagans, there's no way that museum's going to let you take Robert the Doll down to that island. But I do know the guy who owns Harold the Haunted Doll. I'll talk to him. So anyway, I said, okay, I'll talk to them. I'll talk to the boys and see what happens. And in the meantime, I was calling a lot of people I knew who were, familiar with Bagans and Goodwin. And I said, are these guys reputable, and are they going to, make fun of this whole thing? And they're like, no, they'll treat it with great respect. So I, agreed to allow them to take it because I was hoping they were going to do an investigation, a legitimate investigation. And I can't go into a whole lot of detail here, but I will tell you this. As we discussed earlier, Zach said later that it was the most terrifying experience he'd had in 10 seasons of doing the show. Aaron said, I can't remember, he called it like the haunted Barbie doll. I can't remember what he said. But he went on, he did a little promo where he talked about it being the most haunted doll in the world, that sort of thing. I watched it and I was just hugely disappointed because they didn't do a true investigation like I was hoping they would. And a lot of the things that they were saying, I kept saying out loud because I had friends with me. It's like, what a load. This woman this psychic who was in, or a medium who was in Mexico, said there was something like 5 spirits in the doll. And I said, I only know of one, and there was a woman who was crazy, and all this other stuff. And so, like I said, I really didn't pay much attention to it after that. And then a woman that I call in my book, Jane, contacted me from Australia and told me that she was trying to learn how to make dolls because they wanted to buy a service dog for her son, who was 5 years old at the time, who was autistic. And she was on YouTube to learn how to make, little stuffed dolls. And she said somehow ended up on the weird side of YouTube. And I guess she was watching a film about Annabelle. And off to the side, she saw a little thing about Harold that somebody in Great Britain had made. And she started to watch that. She got interrupted. She doesn't remember how or why. She thinks a service person came over, or maybe her husband came home. She paused it, forgot all about the doll being on YouTube. And her son came home and asked her if he could play Reading Apples on her tablet. And she said, sure. So she turned the tablet on, and then boom, there's a picture of Harold. And she said her son did a double take, which he normally never does, and said, there's a child in the doll mummy. And she said, it's just an ordinary doll. And he said, no, mummy, there's a child in the doll, and the woman wants me to help it come out into the light. And so she, said to me, and this was over Messenger, that he has no imagination whatsoever. He can't draw anything. He's very artistic, but he can't draw anything he hasn't seen before. He is incapable of lying. Everything is very black and white to him. She said that at one point he was swimming, and his swimming instructor said to him, "You're on fire." He screamed, jumped out of the pool, literally thinking he was on fire. And she said, I just felt I should tell you all this. And I wrote back to her and I said, I hear this a lot from a lot of mothers whose children see the doll, that there is supposedly a doll trapped within, or there's supposedly a child trapped within the doll. Thank you for letting me know. If he says anything more about it, please, stay in touch. Well, about a week later, she told me that she had taken Vincent to his art therapy class, and his therapist asked him to draw emotions or paint emotions. And this is what he painted. Hopefully you can see that okay. There's a black, almost urchin-looking thing here, and then there's, 4 stars. 1, 2, 3, 4. And the therapist said, "What did you just draw?" And he said, "That's the thing that the doll in my mummy's tablet wants." And anyway, so they went home, and the therapist the next week said, "You want the painting?" And she said, "Sure." So she took it and put it on her kitchen table, or maybe it was her dining table. And every time Vincent saw the doll or saw that painting, he would tell his mom, "Uncle Ant needs to have that picture." That's what he started calling me. That's the first time he referred to me as Uncle Ant, and to this day, he refers to me as Uncle Ant. So she asked me if I wanted it, and I said, "Sure." Well, about that same time, there was a woman helping me do research on composition dolls, which is what Harold is. He's a composition doll from I believe was made in around the mid-1930s. And so she was in Australia, and she was helping me do research on the doll. And she sent me a picture of a sketch, and she said, "Do you like the sketch?" I said, "Yeah, it's actually rather nice." And she said, "Do you want it?" And I said, "Sure." "Okay, well, that'd be $70 Australian." It was like, what? You know what I mean? I owned a damn doll. Why would I want to give you $70 for your sketch? Anyway, I was talking to a friend of mine, Melanie, and Melanie is an artist. She does a lot of beautiful paperwork. She makes custom-made cards. And, we were talking and chatting, and I happened to mention about this woman, making a sketch of the doll and wanting $70 for it. And she said, "Well, would you like me to make a sketch for you?" And I said, "Sure." "How much do you want for it?" She says, "I'll just do it for free." And I said, "Okay." Well, she wrote to me later saying she sat down to make a sketch of the doll that, I just showed you on the cover of the book here. So she sat down to make a sketch of that doll and couldn't do it. What she did instead was she did this.
Oh, wow.
Okay? She couldn't, as hard as she tried, she couldn't make the sketch. But as you can see, there's a demon. There's a black figure, which she said was Harold. And then there are 3 children. Okay? And going back to this, there's a black figure, there's 3 children, or there's 3 stars with gold in it, and then there's 1 black instead of the gold. Down here, this is black. Okay? Well, at the same time that was going on, now keep in mind, I wasn't telling anybody, that people, about Vincent, and I didn't tell them about Melanie and what she had drawn. About the same time, actually, let me make sure I have this straight. Melanie was actually going to mail me this picture, and she Oh, there it is. I'm sorry. So she was putting that paper into an envelope when she had a vision. And she did a paper cut of the vision. And this is the vision she saw. Can you see that? There we go.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Again, a demon with 3 kids. And then this black figure manacled to, the cell or the bars. So she sent that to me around the same time that was going on. A guy in the Baltimore, Maryland area contacted me and told me that when he first saw the episode on Ghost Adventures, he became obsessed with the idea of helping me. And kind of like the obsession that you developed, seeing the doll, right?
Wanting to dress him.
At one point, he said to himself, if only there was some way I could help Anthony figure out what's going on with the doll. He's an insomniac, still is, and he went to bed. I think it was like 1 a.m, and his wife was in bed. Their 3-year-old son at the time was in between him and his wife, and he laid there, turned off the lights, laid there, and closed his eyes to fall asleep when he saw a face that appeared in front of him. He actually drew a sketch, but it was so bad it actually looked like a guy wearing a professional wrestling mask. So he had a professional sketch artist actually make a sketch of it. And he saw a face in front of him. Let me make sure. And this is what he saw.
Wow.
Now, he said the man had a smirk and was horribly burned. Okay? He opened his eyes, closed them again, and this same guy was standing there. But this time, behind him were 2 other figures. This was one of them. And this was another.
Wow.
He said behind them, he saw a little boy and a man, but he couldn't make out what they looked like. And the man kept, smirking at him as though to say, mind your own business. He kept opening and closing his eyes. Every time he closed his eyes, he would see those 3 figures. At one point, he said, a long arm covered with hair, with long nails, reached out and grabbed the 2 girls and then pulled them away. And I don't remember what, if anything, the man with the burned face said to him. So it was almost like, mind your own business.
Wow.
So anyway, that happened, pretty much at the same time that Vincent was having his visions, that Melanie was having her visions. He was having his visions, and nobody knew about it. I mean, they didn't know about it for literally months afterwards. I think it probably came out when the book finally came out that they knew what was going on with each other. Now, based on these sketches, I was literally able to find out who he really was, what his real name was. Because
Wow.
I had a friend named Donna who is an excellent researcher, and I don't remember how she stumbled upon, his picture, but she showed me several pictures, and I saw this one guy, and, maybe it's my, quote, psychic mediumness. I looked at his picture, and I said, it's you, you son of a bitch. I got you. It's you. Found out later on, he died in World War II from an aerial bomb that exploded above his apartment. And he lived for, I think, 8 days, something like that, before he died from his burns. So that would explain why Larry saw his face badly burned. doing research on him, I found out who these two people are. Okay? Now, what's crazy is that I showed this guy's picture when he was alive to Vincent's mom, and the first thing she blurted out was, "Oh my God, he looks like a child molester." Now, you know, I don't know what a child molester looks like, but there have been several people who have not, you know, seen his real picture, but you know, have gotten vibes that he was a child molester. And I do believe he was a child molester because the two people here in these other sketches were his nieces. And I do believe that his the older niece actually fell in love with him at one point. And her father found out about it and had a horseback riding accident and ended up in a wheelchair due to injuries to his head, the back of his skull, and the middle of his back, which is why I believe that several people have, you know, those experiences. That kind of goes back to your question, Shane, as to, is it just a buildup of energy? Well, I purposely, you know, wasn't telling people what was going on. I was just quietly collecting, you know, stories from people who had seen the doll and would tell me that they had, you know, backaches and, you know, headaches and such.
Now, was there any kind of connection between the doll and this man at any point?
I'm still trying to establish that. I do believe, because I know that this guy who was from the UK did travel extensively throughout the US. And I'm like 99.99% positive, without actually seeing a picture of them, you know, in New York, where the doll was originally, you know, made. How these kids ended up in the doll, you know, some kind of magic that I've yet to discover, you know, what that is. Although there have been clues as to what kind of magic was used. I just haven't been able to prove it yet.
Do you think it's pretty much the same thing we see with the media nowadays, the way they try to implant fear with, you know, this whole predictive programming, and maybe just by getting enough people to focus on things that, you know, very real metaphysical results can occur?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I can't remember what it's called off the top of my head. I do talk about it in my book, where a group of researchers who are working for a university decided to literally make up a ghost. And they gave it a history, you know, they gave it characteristics, and then they, you know, were using a table to do table tipping and such and do seances. And the ghost literally responded with everything they had created. Okay. And I talk about in my book that one of the things that I was careful to avoid was not telling people what was going on, because I didn't want, you know, people to be reading and going, "Oh, well, I had a headache," or, you know what I mean? Or create a headache. All right. So I was very careful to avoid that, to be honest with you. Now I don't collect the stories anymore because, you know, after the book came out, you know, it's just like, well, I don't know, you know, now, and anybody will tell you, like Melanie will tell you, Larry will tell you, my friend Simon in the UK will tell you, if they've got a story, I grill them. I mean, I do everything but put them under a hot lamp and, you know, sweat them for several hours. I will ask the same damn question 9 different times, you know, to make sure that they're telling me the truth. Not that I don't believe them, or not that I think they're making it up, but, you know, I have to be sure that what they're telling me is true before, you know, I present the evidence like I just did with you.
So you lay this all out in your book. Where's Harold now?
He's actually right behind me.
Oh, he is still with you. Okay, I thought you got rid of him.
No.
Oh, I
No.
misunderstood.
I mean, I've had a lot of people offer to buy him. And I think you actually offered to buy him, or you wanted me to give him to you or something, Sherry.
Well, I just wanted to fix him and like put clothes on him.
Sherry, I hear that all the time. You know, well, what if you put clothes on him? But the reason why I actually, again, put him away in storage from 2005 to 2013, and only, you know, a handful of people saw him in that time. And at that time, I really didn't know what was going on with it. I just knew people who would look at it would, you know, complain of headaches and backaches and whatnot. And I put it away when somebody said to me, "Has it ever hurt you?" And I said, "No, because I have plenty of holy water and it knows better." And that night, I was getting up out of my chair and I collapsed. I mean, literally my left leg, my right leg gave out from under me. And I went to go see my sports physician, and I told him what happened. And I said, I tore my meniscus. Now, up until that very moment, I didn't know what a meniscus was. Okay? I couldn't tell you a meniscus from a carburetor. All right? And he says, "What makes you think you tore your meniscus?" And I said, "Because every time I walk, my leg gives out from under me." Well, you know, he told me put on a brace, you know, and all that other stuff. Well, 4 months later, I went to see him again. I mean, I kept seeing him month after month after month, asking for an MRI. And 4 months later, I said, you know, I really have to insist on this MRI. And he says, "Why?" And I said, "I told you I tore my meniscus." And he said to me, I'll never forget, he said, "Oh, Anthony, if you would have torn your meniscus, you know, when you go for walks, your leg would give out from under you." And I looked at him and I was pissed. I said, "I guess you missed that the first time I guess you missed me telling you that the first time I saw you." So he sighs and he writes out an order for an MRI. And a few days later, he calls me and he says, "You know, I'm sorry I didn't get back to you sooner. I've been trying to find an orthopedic surgeon who could do surgery on your leg." And I said, "Why? What happened?" He says, "You tore your meniscus." And so anyway, my point is, going back to the clothes thing, I put it away in 2005, had it in storage till 2013 when a friend of mine on Facebook wrote to me and said, her name is LaShawn Croker. Hi, LaShawn. She wrote to me and said, "Look what I found in a flea market." And she said, "I found a doll that looks like Harold." Well, she showed me a picture. It didn't look anything like Harold, but she did find it in a flea market. And at that time, I was believing the whole flea market story. And so a lot of people were just like, you know, "Well, who's Harold?" And I said, well, and I was really reluctant to actually reveal this. I said, "It's a doll I won in 2004 that I have in storage, supposedly haunted. But, you know, I don't know. I mean, things have happened that are kind of weird and wacky, but I don't know if it's really haunted." And they said, "Well, put a picture up." So I put a picture up and immediately got flooded with complaints about headaches and backaches and stomach aches. And one woman said that night she was trying to sleep and she could feel Harold staring at her through her kitchen window. And she got up and saged the entire house and poured salt around. And I was just like, okay, whatever. Anyway, shortly after that, LaShawn wrote to me and said, "Have you seen the video that somebody made about your doll?" And I said, "What video?" And she she gave me the link and I looked it up and there was like 36,000 views on the doll, which I thought was crazy because, you know, I hadn't talked about it since 2005. And there were 36,000 views. And I would have thought that, you know, the interest in the doll would have gone away. Now there's I think there's close to 300,000 views on it last time I looked. But, you know, she wrote the whole thing that was based on the original listing of how it was found in a flea market in Webster, Florida. And nobody's been able to hold on to it since, all this other rubbish. And so, you know, I just wrote in a comment, none of that's true. She said, "Well, how do you know?" And I said, "Because I own the doll." And somebody else immediately wrote, "No, you don't. I saw it in a museum here in the UK." And then she said, "Can you prove you own the doll?" And I said, "Sure." So I went and got a USA Today newspaper because it has the date in big print. Took a picture of the doll next to it. And she looked at it. And the reason why she knew it really was Harold the doll was because it didn't have any clothes on, and she could tell by the markings on the doll's chest, from wherever they were. So, to this day, whenever somebody challenges me, it's like, well, here's the doll, take a look. A little worse for wear because I poured a ton of holy water on it since then. And holy water or water and composition dolls don't mix. But at the time, I really didn't care. I still don't.
Well, I had thought that he was with someone else because of the couple on the couch talking with him being there. But I guess they were just investigating him.
I'm sorry, once again?
There's a video on your YouTube channel where there was a couple on a couch. I think maybe the guy's name Brendan or something. Brendan.
Yeah, that actually they were in Australia, and I was there. I'm the one who filmed that. And that fast forwards it a bit. Again, there were apparently, 5 spirits in the doll. The 3 people I just showed you, a little boy, and a man. Nobody was able, like Larry said, you could see a man. Another woman in Miami wrote to me like 3 months after this happened, because she had no idea what the heck was going on, where she was looking into a room and she saw 5 people there. And she said out loud, I thought there were only 4 spirits in the doll. And again, keep in mind, she did not know anything about Harold at the time. And she said, a guy with very mean eyes came and stood in front of her, blocking her view. And she said, who's the 5th guy? And he slammed a green door in her face, or actually somebody reached out again with hairy arms, long fingernails, reached out, slammed the door in her face. And she heard the man with the mean eyes say, basically telling her to mind her own business. And when the door slammed in her face, she said, who's the 5th person? And she said from behind the door, she heard a young boy, and his low voice said, his name is Anthony.
Wow.
At that time, I was living in an extended stay hotel, which is where I spend most of my life, it seems, in extended stay hotels. And I had the doll with me, and the color of the door was green. So I started thinking, could that be me, really? Okay. So that became like my driving thing, was to free the souls imprisoned in the doll, because that's what Vincent said when he first saw the doll, that the lady, who I found out later on, her name was Lottie, because that's what Vincent said, that her name was Lottie, and she would sing him to sleep when he was going through all the torment he was going through. She would sing him to sleep, and he said her name is Charlotte, but she doesn't like being called that. She likes to be called Lottie. Well, one of the things I found out was that Harold, whose his first name was William, was married to a woman named Lottie. And he was her second husband, and she had several children with her first husband, one of whom died when he was about 2 years old. I think he was 2. He might have been a little bit older. And his name was Harold.
Wow. Creepily
enough. So going back to the 2 people you saw on the couch, that was in Australia. I'd flown out to Australia. And with the help of a friend of mine who lives in Colorado, she was having all kinds of dreams, which would later literally come true. They're almost like prophetic dreams. And one of the dreams she had, she saw what I needed to do to release the spirits with the help of the Catholic Church. And so one of the things she saw was she saw what Vincent would call the black thing, the demon, and she saw 3 stars floating from the doll up into the light. And then she saw an angel nearby, and then she saw me holding the doll. She saw an angel nearby praying for us. When this whole thing went down, it took place in a Catholic church, and there was a woman off to the side. I don't know who she was, but she was praying. And we did what we could, or I did what I could, to facilitate the release of the souls. And I believe 3 of the souls were released, 3 of the 5 souls. One of them was Harold. In fact, the day that I heard, it was like, today is the day, go to this church and, do what you need to do. I said to Harold, I said, look, you're free to go too. Because I was simply repeating what I was hearing. You're free to go too. It's your choice. And I heard a voice say back to me in my head, you and your God will not win this. And so anyway, we went and did what needed to be done in this church. And I was staying with them at the time. They were complete strangers when I got to Australia, but now they're really good friends. They literally, it's just crazy the way everything worked out. And I was in the bedroom that I was using, and I came out and they had a friend there, and they said that our friend would like to see the doll. And I said, well, look, why don't you watch this Ghost Adventures episode? Why don't you watch a couple of these YouTube episodes? You tell me if you still want to see it. Right. And I walked back into my room, and I came out, and they're like, yeah, she still wants to see it. So I went and grabbed the bag, same bag that you saw in Ghost Adventures. Went out and grabbed the bag, opened it up, and the most incredible, indescribable floral scent came out of the doll, came out of the bag. And I sat there and I was like, what the? Do you guys smell this? And there are different parts of the living room. Like, yeah. What does it smell like to you? And the only way I can describe it was a floral smell, floral scent. It wasn't lavender like, most paranormal things, right? It was a scent I'd never smelled before. And I said, stick your face down in there. And they all did. And I was so freaked out that I didn't think to take a video of this whole thing. I snapped a couple of pictures. And they're like, yeah, it smells, it's a floral scent. Well, in the Catholic Church, that's known as the odor of sanctity, which is typically associated with what we would call our Blessed Mother. And to me, it was a sign that what we had done had worked. And so that's who you saw sitting on the couch, because I wanted to get them on film talking about, what they had smelled that night. Now, a couple of nights later, or maybe it was like next night, I think it was the next night or 2 nights later, I was flying from Brisbane to Adelaide to go see a couple of friends. And I got a message from Larry, who did the sketches, and he did not know what we had done because, again, I kind of do everything on delay. I let people know on delay. And he said that he had just had a vision where he saw Harold looking like really glum. Like he said, I got the impression, he says, I don't know what you did. He said, I got the impression that he had made a mistake. I saw the demon behind him with his hand on his shoulder. And the look on his face was like, I made my bed, now I have to lay in it. And to me, that just told me that, what I had done had worked. So 3 of the 5 souls have been released. Harold and one other soul are still, in prison, or Harold's tethered to the doll, and there's one other soul still in prison to the doll. And I'm going to reveal for the first time publicly that I do believe that that soul is me. That's why I still have the doll, and that's why I'm still on this quest.
Wow.
So you think this goes to the point of how, we say time is just an illusion, and maybe this is a younger aspect of yourself since she saw it as a child, or maybe this is the childlike vibration?
I talked to Larry, and Larry said he did see a man standing behind the guy and the two girls. He saw a little boy and he saw a man that he couldn't recognize. And, going to your question, in all honesty, there's all kinds of weird, freaky things that happen all the time, especially involving Vincent. Vincent and I have this incredible connection, even though we've never met. He knows what's going on in my life as it's going on.
That's the
I'll give you an
autistic
example.
child.
I'm sorry?
That's the autistic child, right?
Yeah, that's the autistic child. One morning, his mother wrote to me because he tells his mother, and his mother kind of translates as best she can because he's still, especially when it comes to this thing, apparently he was not very communicative at all when this whole thing went down. And now he speaks in almost cryptic language. And one of the things he said was, and I received this message at 3:30 in the morning, was the white and pink flower is pretty. They want to thank you. And I was thinking, white and pink flower, that doesn't make any sense. I wrote something about it in a private group that I have on Facebook called Team Harold. These people have been personally affected by Harold and, continue to feel its effects. So I literally put everything down except for the white and pink flower thing because I said there is one more thing, but it doesn't make any sense. So I'm not going to talk about it now. And that was 3:30 in the morning. What is this? Mountain time, I guess. Or maybe it's Central. But anyway, so 3:30 in the morning, I get that message. 5:30 in the morning, Melanie, who made the paper cut and the sketch, woke up, decided to finish a card she was working on. 8 o'clock in the morning, I opened up my Facebook and I saw she had posted a card. And I like looking at her cards because she makes beautiful cards. Again, they're handmade. And this is what I saw. I literally got the message 2 hours before she finished this.
Wow.
Now, another time I was in Gardner, Massachusetts, pardon me. And I was renting this huge, huge apartment. And winter was coming on. It was getting cold, so I got a space heater. And I'm not going to heat this whole damn apartment when I'm just laying here in bed. So I, bought the space heater, turned it on, and I don't think it was 45 seconds later, I received a message from Jane, Vincent's mom, saying, Vincent's very worried about you and the fire you just started. And I'm like, the fire I looked at that, it's like, it has to be. Another time I was flying into, I was going to go from Denver to Connecticut, and I flew into Newark, New Jersey. And I have a picture that he drew. And that morning she wrote to me again, and she said, Vincent says not to worry, everything will work out. And I said, well, what is he talking about? And she said, are you going on a plane flight? And I said, yeah, as a matter of fact, I'm leaving in about 3 hours. And then the next thing she sent me was a luggage that he had drawn and a tag on the luggage that said EWR. I did not know this at the time until I checked my bag, but EWR was the designation for the New Jersey airport, for the airport. I think it's, I can't remember what the name of it is now. But EWR was the designation for that airport, and I did not know that until, 3-4 hours later.
Wow.
So he knows. He knows. I was having a severe asthma attack, and he drew a picture of this, black thing, as he calls it. And it has what looks like a barbed wire coming down from it, splitting a figure in half. And, it was his way of explaining why I was having the asthma attack. Just, crazy, crazy things like that happens all the time.
So what do you see? What do you see the future of this doll? Are you going to just hang on to it and continue to investigate it until you get to the bottom of it, or?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm really close now. Right now, I'm in New Mexico, and one of the things that he drew was a cairn, which is like a stack of stones, and they're used. I mean, they still exist. They're used as markers. And he said, I'm not supposed to find it, but I'm supposed to study it. And it's like, well, study what? Well, again, Melanie was at a conference. She's a very good friend of mine. And actually, she and her husband, David, have both seen Harold and the 3 children before I released them in visions that they had. And she was at a conference last week, and her friend, Stephanie, said, come here, I want to show you something. And they drove, I don't know, a couple of miles, 2-3 miles, 2-3 minutes away. And they saw the oldest church in North America. And on the front and on the sides were these cairns, right? And it's actually dedicated to St. Michael. And what was interesting, doing, just a minimal amount of research, in the 1950s, they dug up the floor behind the communion rail and found human remains. So, what that has to do with anything, I don't know. But I do know that's the reason why I'm here in New Mexico, was to find that church. What happens from here, I don't know, to be honest with you. But eventually what I would like to do is some way, somehow, this is my dream. One of 2 things happens. Either Harold, somehow or another, goes before God, whether it's through an exorcism or, he goes willingly, he goes before God. If that doesn't happen, I literally would like the Catholic Church, and I've been working towards that, goal up until recently, to take it and put it in a vault or a safe or something deep in the bowels of the Vatican, where they lock the door, throw away the key and forget it exists. If that doesn't happen, Vincent literally recently wrote to me and said, the next step is to get the story out there, which is why I'm talking to you, to be honest with you. Get the story out there. The story needs to be told. What that means, I'm not sure. But then out of the blue, somebody who is a rock and roll musician contacted me from where he was in Europe and just discovered the doll. He's not an investigator, but he has this intense interest in it. And we've been talking, and he's going to come down here. He lives in Las Vegas. He's going to come down here, and he wants to shoot a video, and, who knows where to go from there. But I'm sure Vincent will tell me as time goes on. There's just so much to the story, to be honest with you. It's just crazy. At one point, Vincent drew a river and a bridge. And I don't remember how I found it, but I found that exact river with the exact rock formation and the exact bridge in New Hampshire. Okay? So my friend Donna, who originally helped me discover who Harold really is, and I went up to New Hampshire. We stood there at the bridge, and we were kind of, going, okay, now what? Took some pictures, and we were driving away. And I found out later on that Aleister Crowley, the self-professed most wicked, the evilest man in the world, lived 2 miles away from where we live, from where we were. So, it's just one big puzzle. I like to say it's a 1,000-piece puzzle, and at this point, there's still 300 pieces missing.
Would you feel guilty getting rid of it, though, and giving it to someone? Would you feel like you're passing on a bad omen? Or
I would. If in all honesty, I don't know what it's capable of. I mean, one guy did a favor for me, and he's a paranormal investigator. And to return the favor, he really wanted to investigate the doll. And at that point, the only guys who had done it were Lockdown Paranormal. And I said, look, I'll let you be the second, group, so to speak, to do the investigation. So I sent it to him. He lived in Connecticut, and he is actually friends with the Warrens. He actually grew up knowing the Warrens. And still to this day doesn't have much nice to say about them. I'll just leave it at that. But he got the doll, and as soon as he got the doll, he won a trip to Disney World for 4. He and his wife and his 2 kids. He got a job he had been waiting for and had given up on getting. He got some windfall of money. Everything started going right for this guy. You know what I mean? Everything he touched turned to gold. Well, he kept it for 2 weeks, then he sent it back. And immediately after that, everything turned to shit for him. Right? He was complaining to me. And, he said, maybe you don't respect the doll enough. And I said, no, what I think happened was that he was treating you like a mushroom. And he says, a mushroom? And I said, yeah, he kept you in the dark and he fed you full of shit. He's like, oh my God. He goes, he really took me for a ride, didn't he? And I said, yeah, because he wanted you to keep him. He does not want to be with me. I hear that over and over and over again. People who I wrote about in my book, a woman in Long Island. She was asking me about the doll. She was a personal friend of mine. She asked me about the doll. And she said, what you need to do is you need to have a strega take a look at it and tell you what to do. And I said, what's a strega? She said, an Italian witch. I said, let me guess, you know an Italian witch? She says, well, my grandmother was an Italian witch, but you're a medium. You can talk to her. And, and I said, you really don't need to go there. And she says, what's the doll going to do? It's in Denver. I'm in Long Island. How's it going to do anything to me? And, I started, I really tried to dissuade her from saying anything more, but she just kept going and she was laughing. And I said, you know what? If anything happens to you, it's on you. And she laughed. She goes, yeah, whatever. Well, she contacted me later on and on Messenger. And she said, Anthony, what's going on? And I said, what do you mean? She said, there are things flying off my shelves. There are things falling from the walls and in my kitchen. She had a 165-pound bull mastiff that was her bodyguard. He got up, ran into the kitchen to see what was going on. She said he yelped like somebody was trying to kill him, came running back, was hiding underneath her, shivering. And at one point, I said, where are you now? She said, I'm in my bathroom. I said, where's Blue, her dog? He's outside, barking, wanting me to let him in. I said, let him in. She said, I can't remember what she said, but, eventually she's just like, what's going on? And all I could tell her was, I told you, knock it off. Well, then she wrote me the next morning. This huge thing, which I reprinted in my book. She said she couldn't get to sleep that night, and she heard his voice in her head the entire time. And at one point, he said to her, Anthony blames me for everything that goes wrong. And, he was basically saying, but you're nice. Could you ask Anthony, to let you have me? And he thinks that I'm trapped in the doll. And I said to her, and I call her I call her Lori in the book. I said, Lori, look, if it wasn't trapped in the doll, why would it want you to have the doll? Right? And she said, I never thought about that. Well, that literally shortly after that, we never talked again because she wanted to, she was like, I haven't been to church in years. I'm going to go to church. I'm going to go to confession. I'm going to go to mass. And, basically was giving me the finger after that. So I don't know. I really don't know. But this is why I'm going to show you this one final thing. Let me make sure I get this. Vincent at one point, and I think about half of my book is about everything he was going through and how I tried to help from Denver, Colorado while he was in Australia. And I did a ritual. Oh, I remember what your original question was, and I'll get back to that in here in just a second. I did a ritual sealing on the doll, and I literally wondered if it worked. And I was assured it did because for 2 weeks nothing happened in their home. And Jane's husband, who was a hardcore skeptic, actually a cynic more than a skeptic, did not believe in the paranormal, was so freaked out by the time, half of this was going on that, he was glad for the relief when things finally settled down because, again, I had done a ritual sealing. And Vincent was, one day, all of a sudden, his mother sent me a video of him running around the house. He was holding a PlayStation control in his hand, and he was screaming, "Not again, not again, please stop, not again." And she was videotaping this, and she sent it to me. She said, "What do you think's going on?" And I said, "I don't know, because the doll's sealed." And I said, "Ask him to draw what he sees." And this is what he drew. What he calls the black thing, which is, again, like the black thing you saw in that one painting.
Yeah. And
then the doll. Here's the doll underneath. And that's when I realized that this and this are two separate things. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
Okay. So if, again, I gave it to you, I don't know, if you decided, to do something with it and all of a sudden become, a multimillionaire, it probably would allow you to do that. But I think, just like William discovered, that there will be a price to pay.
Always is, right?
Yep. And it goes back to this. There he is. This was the closest thing that when she saw the vision. And as you can see, there's manacles from here to the bars. And Melanie told me later on, she felt as though he did his wishes and could go all the way around the world, but had to come back. And which would explain why people were being harassed and all around the United States. I heard from people in Australia. I still hear from people in Australia. I hear from people in, the UK. I've heard from people in places like Omar, for goodness sakes. I didn't even know Omar existed. So, Saudi Arabia. I've heard from people in Saudi Arabia who said, I looked at your doll and, all kinds of crazy things were happening.
Now, you said when you were writing the book, you actually had to narrow it down quite a bit and then take stuff out, because some of the stuff was just repeating things that happened. And just to shorten the book, you had to actually combine some of the incidences, I guess.
Well, no, I didn't combine it. What I did was, when I was having it edited, and crazy enough, I had 5 people edit it, and when I turned it in and it came back, there was all kinds of misspellings and everything else. It's almost like no work had ever been done on it. But as I was reading over the manuscript, Vincent's mom looked so bad that, I literally took out like 30,000 words. And a lot of it was because she was so scared, as to what was going on, that she literally started shutting down. At one point, she stopped talking to me, and this part is in the book. And, I said, if you're going to kick me to the curb, fine, as long as you're okay with what's going on with your son. I wish I would have pulled down these paintings that he'd made. I mean, he made some really intricate paintings of, like one time he was hiding under his desk and his teacher said, "Are you okay?" And he held out this one drawing and she said, "What's this?" He says, "That's what's in my bedroom." And it's like this crazy looking creature I can't even describe. Uh, but, you know, it was just like, at one point I said, you know, if you're going to, you know, stop talking to me, all I'm trying to do is help. And she said, he told me not to. And I said, who told you not to? She said, the man in the dream. And I said, well, what did he look like? She said, I don't know. I couldn't see him. But he told me not to talk to you anymore. And she was, you know, she did it hoping it would stop. Well, in all honesty, Shane, I have people doing that to me to this very day. You know what I'm saying? You know, where I mean, like, I have, I don't know, probably 20 people in Team Harold that I keep because, you know, they have so many experiences. And they freely admit if they, you know, say anything in like a post I put, you know, that one, they won't talk about it. Two, they don't want to think about it. But I would say literally out of the 20 plus there, 2 or 3 still talk to me. Right? They're fed up with it. They, you know, one friend of mine, a very good friend of mine in Australia, stopped talking to me because of a couple of dreams she had 2 nights in a row where she saw Harold. And, you know, it scared the living daylights out of her. So, you know, it's that sort of thing. I took out, like I said, about 30,000 words because it literally made her look worse than, you know, she was just scared.
Mm-hmm.
She didn't know how to deal with it. You know, they weren't religious at all. I like to joke that if I put $100 Australian bill in the middle of their Bible, you know, it'd be there, and then have a note says, you know, call me when you see this. 20 years from now, you know, the only difference between that and the bank would be it'd be collecting interest in the Bible. I mean, in the bank, right?
Right.
But I was having her call Catholic priest in order to come and help, and they literally came in and stopped Harold and stopped the demon from harassing Vincent. Now, here's the final thing I'm going to show you.
All right.
I kept saying to myself, and I said to her at one point, if only we knew what this black thing's name was, because that's what he kept calling it, the black thing. You know, we could probably get a handle on it and probably force it to stop. And that is eventually what the Catholic Church did use to get it to stop harassing Vincent. Anyway, he was taking a bath, and she wrote to me and she said, you know, who is Abaddon, or Abadon? And I said, who? I have no idea. I said, ask him to write it out, you know, what he's seeing. So he did. Let's see. There we go. I think, there we go.
Yeah.
You can see it?
Yeah, directly from Revelation.
Yep. Now, at the time, he was 6 years old, okay? And this is Hebrew, and this is Greek. And all of a sudden, I knew what I was up against. And it was probably a week or two later, I told her to call a priest that she had contacted before. He referred her to somebody else. This priest came out, blessed the house. Nothing happened. I mean, you know, things literally stopped it. And he blessed the house at the same time I was doing the ritual sealing. So I thought it was over. Started up again. This time 2 priests came out, talked to Vincent, and, you know, she said one seemed like he was in charge. So either he was a bishop or he was the exorcist for that diocese. And he said to Vincent's parents, you ever thought about putting him on medication? And Jane said to him, well, he is autistic. And so then the other priest who had come before kind of came to his defense. She said they went out to the car, came back with laminated cards and candles and holy water and all kinds of stuff, and went through and blessed the house. And then, at one point they took Vincent aside, and she and her husband could hear him say, if you have any more, if you have any hold on Vincent, in the name of Christ, we command you to release him, that sort of thing. And since then, Vincent has been right as rain.
Wow.
So, again, to go back to your question, if I, sold it or gave it to somebody else, the question that comes to my mind is, how do you put a price on evil? Because what's my problem would then become your problem, and it might still be my problem. You see what I mean?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And, if you, had any kind of thoughts of, well, I could do this and become a millionaire, you probably could. I honestly believe you probably, wouldn't have to work the rest of your life. Right? But, again, there's a price to be paid. And it could be argued, well, that's your problem, not mine. But you see, I do believe in God. Okay? I always say the good news is that if the devil's real, it means God is real. And, if I have to stand before God and explain to him why he sold to be you, knowing that there was this possibility, I just don't need that kind of karma.
Yeah, I feel you. So, if Harold's journey ends with you, and you've already written this book, if there's more discoveries, are you planning on another book to explain where this all goes?
Yeah, I am, but it's like I'm thinking of writing. Actually, I'm going to write a second book. I just have to figure out in my mind how to put certain things, because William was a member of British aristocracy, at least his father was. So he was a very well-known man. His father literally was famous around the world. Harold did not match his father's success, but his brother-in-law, the father of the two young ladies I showed you, and there's actually more people in the family, was also very famous. And it's like I thought a million times, why me? Okay. I bought the doll when I was in Denver, Colorado. Found out that the father of the two girls, and the mother and the two girls, actually there were more girls than that, lived 45 minutes away from where I lived. And Harold was a freeloader at that time, because, he was a very prominent man. He actually played an important part. Harold's brother-in-law played an important part in the Civil War. So it's like, literally one of the things, if I'm going to write a third book, which I do have enough material for a third book, is like, how do I prevent myself from being sued because William has living relatives who still live in the UK, own businesses and all this other stuff. And if I come out and say, your grandfather was a child molester, but I can't prove it, you know what I mean?
Oh,
that might not go over real well, to be honest with you. So, it's a crazy story. I keep thinking, what is the end game here? Because I went and one point saw a vicar general of a diocese. The vicar general is like the assistant to the bishop, and presented my case to him, or tried to, and he literally blew me off, even though I got a letter of recommendation from two priests saying we believe this to be true. He literally didn't have the time of day for me. He might have been having a bad day. So, what's next? I don't know. I do know that things still happen to this day. I mean, there have been a number of things that happened to me, which would be part of the second book that, most people don't know about. Like the time a guy who claimed to be an exorcist said, I can help him. And I was talking to I was talking to somebody who knew him, and she was our go-between. And I remember thinking, what the hell? you know, why not let him do it? And I heard a voice in my head say, you know, because he was just like, well, I've seen this guy. He's a lower level demon. He's pretending to be something he's not. And then I heard a voice in my head say, tell him, you know, he saw, I can't remember how he put it. Basically, he saw Harold. He didn't see me. And then the next thing I heard him say was, tell him if he comes anywhere near me, I'll kill him. Well, you know, I kept that to myself, right? And he was telling her to tell me what I needed to do. One of them was like, put it out in the shed or something stupid like that. And I was just like, really? You know, this doll has been harassing people around the world, and I'm going to put it in the shed. It's going to go, okay, I quit, right? Anyway, like I said, I didn't tell her what I just heard. And all of a sudden, my stomach felt like it was coming apart. And I said to her, listen, I've got to go to the bathroom. I'll call you back. I got up, went to the bathroom, stood up. Next thing I knew, I remember dreaming I was laying in my bed on a pillow. When I came to, I was actually laying against the sink, and I had 3 cracked ribs. I got up, and I felt like 3 metal bands around my chest area. And I was leaning up against the wall, and kind of leaning forward, and I remember thinking, I wonder if I'm having a heart attack. And the same voice I heard earlier I heard it say, you know, death would be a blessing compared to what I have in mind for you. So I stumbled out into the living room. My friend Donna, who had been helping me research, her nephew actually lived up the stairs from me. So I called her because I didn't have his number. I called her and asked her to have him come down. He came down, and I said, you see that bottle of holy water? He said, yeah. I said, take it, open it, and sprinkle that doll with it. So he did, and the moment he did, the 3 bands left my chest. But I was still left with 3 broken ribs. So another time, somebody else, I was going to do the Salem Paracon, which was the only Paracon. Actually, there were 2 Paracons I was considering doing. Because, you know, I literally was hoping that somebody would come and say, this is what's going on, this is what you need to do. I was going to do the Salem Paracon in Salem, Massachusetts. And somebody contacted me and said, you know, I can help you with that doll. And I wrote back, really, what can you do? And the moment I wrote that, a crucifix came flying off the wall towards me. I was just like, wow. Okay, never mind. And then a few days later, in my bathroom, as with most guys, I guess gals, you know, I had reading material in my bathroom, and I happened to be reading a book about Mother Teresa at the time, and I put it on top. I put the book about Mother Teresa on top of the copy I had of, you know, my book about Harold. And I was washing my hands. All of a sudden, I heard a crash. I turned around, and the book that I had on top of the Mother Teresa book I had on top of the book of Harold had flown across the bathroom and hit the wall and was laying there. And I mean, you know, just crazy stories like that while I was in Massachusetts as well. Pope Francis was in New York City. And again, being a Roman Catholic, I had it on. And just as, you know, a joke almost, I put Harold in front of it and said, here, you know, right. And as soon as I opened it up, my dog that I had, Bentley, he passed away last Thanksgiving. He was hit by a car, unfortunately, when somebody broke into my house that day while I was gone. He ran under the bed. I looked underneath there, and that poor little baby was shivering. And, you know, I put the doll away, and he, you know, after a few minutes, he came out. And then the next day, saw Pope Francis on TV, opened that bag, under the bed he ran. I've got pictures of that. You know, wow. Pictures of him just looking just, you know, terrified, literally terrified. And I, you know, apologized when I realized, you know, another time I took the doll to daily mass, And Vincent knew about it. And Vincent said, the black thing is pissed, or the black thing is angry. And he ran into his room, locked his door, and wouldn't come out for like 3 or 4 hours.
Mm.
So, that all that would probably be in the second book, leading up to going to Australia and thinking it was done. And I literally thought it was done. Literally thought it was done, even though I believe that Harold remained, tethered to the doll. I literally thought it was done. And, now here I am. I mean, things, the cost to me financially, emotionally, with friends has been just enormous. Just enormous. Do
you regret ever getting it, I guess, to begin with?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
But I've also come to the conclusion that literally my whole life, I honestly believe that I came here to deal with this damn doll. I really do. As crazy as it sounds. And I mean, this whole story's crazy. If I were sitting in your place, I'd be going, whatever.
But you went into it as a skeptic yourself, too,
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, a lot of the things that took me so long to learn, the reason why they took me so long to learn, even after I, the thing with this happening, and then, Larry in Baltimore, and Vincent in Australia, and people having all these dreams, I was still skeptical.
Just hard to believe. It's hard to wrap your mind around that.
Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, I didn't believe in demons until, when the two priests came out. I actually was making a YouTube video, and I had a statue of St. Michael. And I was just, going to do a YouTube video, like the priests are on their way, to help Vincent. And I probably did like 4 takes, couldn't figure out what was wrong. And then I realized I had the statue in front of the doll where I'd had it for like 2 weeks. And I thought, well, I'll put it over here in the middle of the bed, and then I'll just kind of introduce it. So I'm talking, and the video's on YouTube. I'm talking, all of a sudden I hear this crash, and I look over, and the doll is upside down between my dresser and the bed. Now, I'm not one to curse, very often. And it takes a lot normally to make me curse, although I realize I did it a couple of times tonight. But I used to hear this guy who every other word out of his mouth was a curse word. He was doing these paranormal shows. And I remember thinking, well, that's just, really, you don't have a bigger vocabulary than that. So my point is, as I'm looking at the statue, and I have the statue here with me as well, upside down between my dresser and, the bed, a good 18 inches from where I, put it, in my mind, I'm going, what the fuck? Holy shit. Oh my God.
And so that happened live then. You're actually.
Yeah. I mean, you see me scanning over where it ended up, and then bringing it back. And then, all of a sudden it's like, and you see it there. And, what I was going to say was, again, if I were sitting in your, in your shoes, listening to, me talk about this, I'd be like, I mean, between you and me and all your listeners, I don't put a lot of stock into the idea that dolls are demonic. Every time I hear about a demonic doll, I always roll my eyes. Even haunted dolls, I think, some people are like what you said. They create things, right? It's like, oh, this doll is haunted. And then, something falls down, and it's like, oh, that was the doll, right? And, there are going to be people who are going to hate me for saying this, but, I say it all the time. When they ask me about Ed and Lorraine Warren and Annabelle, I just don't believe the stories because, it's Ed and Lorraine Warren. They're the, what I mean? It's like, where's all the parchment paper? What was destroyed in a flood? Okay. In my book about the doll, there's 20 plus pages of evidence supporting what I'm saying on YouTube. I've got people who are coming on saying, yeah, this happened to me, So it's not just Anthony, saying these things. And, like I said, I'm not out to convince anybody, but, I do invite people, if you're interested, yeah, there's a lot of crap out there, but anything I've written, has come from the heart. I've often said that if you put me in front of a firing squad and, you had, 6 guys pointing, rifles at my heart and saying, Anthony, you lie, you die, is the book bullshit? I'd say, no, next question. All right. I will go to my grave, and with my last breath, I will tell you that the book is true.
That's wild. So how long until this video? You said there's a video that's going to be coming out? Somebody?
Yeah, actually, I talked to a guy, like I said, he was a rock and roll drummer. And he's, he wrote to me today and said, I want you to know I'm not an investigator. And I said, thank God. If you were...
They're kind of let you down, haven't they?
Well, because, again, investigators, and, God bless you, because I used to be an investigator. I literally have not done any serious investigation since the doll, because I've just focused on the doll. A lot of what, they put up can be explained away. I remember one time seeing a couple of pictures a reputable paranormal group put up where they saw a couple of shadow figures. And, I was just like, well, that one is obviously the shadow of a clock. And this one, I blew it up. I said, interestingly enough, that shadow person is wearing designer jeans. I sent it to them. I showed them that what happened was whoever was taking the picture apparently did not see somebody standing in there. It was obviously a female, and she was wearing designer jeans. You could see the label on her jeans, right?
Oh my God.
And I was just like, well, unless, shadow people are fashion conscious, I guess you're right, it is a shadow person. It goes back to that whole thing you brought up earlier. It's a great question, right? What if everybody just knows these stories and, they build them up in their mind? Is that possible? Yeah, it's possible. I'm sure it happens a lot, which is why, I don't post all the stories that I hear anymore.
Yeah. Well, we had one here locally that was called Crybaby Bridge, and it was like, at midnight, you're on this one-lane bridge. You could actually park there because it was way out in the country. But at midnight, you hear the baby cry, and, of course, we went out there all brave, and we didn't hear any baby cry or whatever. But there was a lot of jokes and a lot of fun just, it's like a good ghost story or whatever. So I can imagine how, something can be taken like that and really just blown out of proportion, and then, you start attributing things, But at the same time, what about, the ones that didn't know anything about it and had experiences?
Yeah, a woman wrote to me recently. She was asking me questions. And she's actually studying parapsychology, I guess, in the UK. And all of a sudden she started saying that her husband decided to look at the doll online before as she put it, I could warn him. And he pulled up the doll, was looking at it, and all kinds of things were going, crazy with her computer. And so he had to restart the computer. He literally had to turn it off and turn it back on again, right? Mm-hmm. Normally what happens is you turn it back on, you turn it off, you turn it back on. It goes to your home screen where, it shows everything, right? No. It came up with a picture of Harold again. And then apparently all kinds of weird Harold images started appearing. And, he's muttering to himself. And I don't remember if he turned it off or turned it back on again, because she said, well, you finally got it working. But what I loved was she said, I don't know, maybe it was all just a coincidence. It's like, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. That's what I said, okay.
Well, that's awesome. Okay, so you got the other video that's going to be coming up at some point. This guy's this rock star.
He's coming down in beginning of March. He's actually put together a crew of guys, and in fact, one of the guys said, "I thought that doll was still on, the island down in Mexico." It's like, no, he's here like about 8 feet away from me. And I hear that a lot. I mean, another woman said, that's not Harold, because I went to a museum and I saw the real Harold the doll. I don't know what you saw, but, you know, I have the real doll here.
Maybe that would be a safe place for it eventually,
What's that?
Museum. In a museum, locked away somewhere. Yeah.
Well, you know, some guy wrote to me, and he's fairly well known, at least on the East Coast, as being being an investigator. So I won't mention his name. But, you know, he said, I can help. And I said, well, what would you do? And basically, you know, what I read into it was like, well, we'll bless it with holy water. We'll bless it with holy salt. We'll bless it with holy oil. And, you know, and he left it at that. And I said, and then you're going to put him in, you know, you're going to put him on display, charge people to come see him, do all kinds of EVPs and stuff, just like you did with the yellow doll. I just saw you, you know, displaying on a YouTube video. And he said, well, I did that, you know, completely honoring God. It's just like, oh, yeah, that makes all the difference in the world as far as I'm concerned. So, you know, I mean, at one point, I remember I was looking at home plans. And I saw this house and it had a nursery, space for a nursery. And I was thinking, you know, I wouldn't put a nursery down there, but I don't know, maybe I'd, you know, make a little museum for Harold. And this is before I really knew what the heck was going on with Harold. And a friend of mine, Erica Cunningham, came to do a reading on Harold, and she didn't believe dolls could be haunted. She was saying that, you know, she was just getting the vibrations off the doll, and then before she was done, she was a believer in haunted dolls. But at one point, she looked at me and she said, are you thinking of making a museum and having Harold as a centerpiece? I said, I was thinking of that like 30 minutes ago, right? Another time, again, with Lori in Long Island, before she eventually, you know, just, you know, cut off all communication with me. I was going for a walk after, you know, she told me everything that had happened to her. And I was thinking, you know, what am I going to do with this doll? You know, and if maybe there is something to this and all this other stuff. And, you know, I thought, you know, maybe I'll write a book about it or make a movie about it. And then I get a phone call from her. And I was like, hi, Lori. And she said, Harold wants me to tell you something. I was like, Harold wants you to tell me something? What's that? She said, he likes the idea of you. He doesn't mind the idea of you writing a book about him. But he doesn't want you to make a movie about him because he doesn't want to be made into a circus or a carnival sideshow.
Wow.
It was just like, are you kidding me? She goes, no, it's just what I heard. I was supposed to tell you that.
No,
are you okay? Sherry came back. So, you know, I mean, it's just, I've got more stories for you than.
You've actually got some more stories just about, you know, other things too that we'd like to have you back to discuss in the future, maybe. Just
about
mediumship and just all that stuff is.
Yeah, that's another thing. I mean, you know, before it started happening, if you would have asked me, you know, do you believe that somebody could talk to the dead? I would have laughed at you. You know, I really would have. And then somebody died, and you know, I was talking to her, telling her how much I was going to miss her. Next thing I knew, I could feel her presence next to me. And without an EVP or anything like that, I did believe, you know, you could communicate with the souls or with spirits using EVPs. I could hear her talking to me. And the crazy thing was at the end is that, you know, literally while I was listening to it, I kept thinking, oh, this is just your grief, you know. And at the end, she said, do me a favor, will you? Tell my family I'm okay. And later on, I was telling some friends of mine about it, and one of them said, you know, you're going to tell them? Actually, they all said, you're going to tell them? And I said, are you crazy? They're going to think I'm nuts. And I said, I think I'm nuts. I think it's just my grief. And this one girl says, you know, well, why not? That's your thing, isn't it? And I said, what do you mean that's my thing? She said, you know, talking to dead people. And that question, you know, bugged me for a good couple of weeks. I went online, just very briefly went online and said, somebody like George Anderson or John Edwards, something like that. No, more like Oda Mae Brown from Ghost. Right?
Right,
and I said, this, you know, this thing happened. You know, I don't know if it's possible to talk to the dead, but if you've lost a loved one, message me. This was on Yahoo Messenger. Just give me your first name and that's it. I will get back to you. So, you know, you message me and say, my name is Shane. I'd be like, okay, Shane, you know, are you available to do a session at, you know, this Sunday at 5 o'clock? You said yes. I'd be like, great. Do not tell me who you're hoping to reconnect with. This is all I want to hear from you. Okay. You know, if you would have told me, well, I'm hoping to hear from my father. Boom. You're just, you know, I disqualified you. Okay. I did not want to know who you wanted to hear from. And then, you know, you contact me again. We're doing all this over Messenger because I didn't want to see your face. I didn't want to see facial expressions, you know, anything like that. And then I would just start describing what was going on with me. Like one woman, I said, you know, you just lost your mother. And she said, yes. And I said, she died from cancer? And she said, yes. And I said, she was like skin and bones. And she's like, yes. And I said, I feel like I'm skin and bones. That's why I'm saying this. Was her name Cheryl? And then, you know, she's like, oh my God, because I would see the name Cheryl in front of me. And, you know, at that time I could literally see people. Now I don't. You know, for a period of time. And then, you know, it's just like talking to them. It's just like, well, why can't I see you now? And then they said, literally, I heard those voices in my head say, well, because we knew you wouldn't believe it if you couldn't see us and describe us. So we did that so you would know that what was going on was real. But now that, you know, you've done this a few thousand times, you know, you don't need that anymore.
So it's more for you than other people then.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, at one time, if somebody were shot, I would literally felt like had been shot. If they would have been stabbed, I would feel myself being stabbed. I remember one time doing a group session, and when it was all over, you know, there was food laid out for the people there. And I looked down and I saw mashed potatoes. And I looked at this one guy and I said, you have a brother who died? And he's like, yeah. And I said, he loved mashed potatoes. He's like, he did. And I started describing a few other things. I said, oh my God, he was beaten to death. And his wife covered her mouth and ran off, you know, because she literally wanted to scream. And he said, he was. And he's like, how did you know? And I said, because I feel myself wanting to collapse to the floor because I feel myself being kicked and punched all over. You know, it was that now, thank God, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. It's not that bad. You know, every once in a while, if somebody hangs himself, I'll feel like something around my neck pulling me up. Mm-hmm. But now, typically, if somebody wants to convey that, you know, they took their own life, they'll do this. And I'll say, you know, somebody took their own life. You know, your loved one or, you know, your brother took his own life. And then, you know, I'll start to feel something and I'll just convey that. But a lot of times I see symbols that tell me what I need to know. Or I get thoughts and feelings that tell me what I need to know. But I usually don't see the person. The last time that happened, this guy, I was talking to him and his daughter had passed away. And he kept insisting I tell him what she looked like. And by this time, I hadn't seen him in I don't know how long. So I said to her, you know, do me a favor and give your father a break and, you know, show me what you look like. And I described her, and he just started wailing. So I literally had to wait for him to stop. And I said, you know, obviously that meant a lot to you. And he said, yeah, she died in a fire. And I needed to know that on the other side, she's still as beautiful as she was before the fire. Mm. So.
That's powerful stuff, man. So those gifts have continued that you've just sort of honed them in to where you're not really immersed in the experience as much. It's more like information rather than having a real physiological feeling that accompanies
Yeah,
it.
I mean, I'm just a messenger. As far as being a medium goes, my mission is to teach people that death is not the end of life, love, or relationships, and that you're never alone. If I can do that during a session, it went well. I mean, I can tell you, I don't know how many sessions, like recently I said to this woman, I said, "Did you make pasta last night?" And she laughed. She says, "Yeah." And I said, "Lasagna." She said, "Yeah, how'd you know?" I said, "Well, you just told me." And she started laughing. I said, "If that doesn't convince you that he's always with you, you know what I'm saying?"
Yeah.
Another time I talked to people and I, would say to them, I remember saying to one woman, I'm saying, "He wants you to know he's glad you're finally getting out." And she's like, "Well, what does that mean?" I said, "Well, you said that, you finally went out for the first time in over a year to dinner with 3 of your friends and you had such and such for dinner." And she's like, "Oh my God, I did." Now I can't tell you the details because in all honesty, it's not that important to me. It doesn't mean anything to me. It's supposed to mean something to them.
Right.
I can't tell you if she had red wine or whatever she had. Another time, let me see, I'm trying to remember because I usually forget these things. It's like being in a dream, and when I'm done, I, forget everything.
Mm-hmm.
But, I was teasing this woman about the fire she started on her stove, and the fire department had to come. And I was saying, "Oh my God," he's laughing hysterically because he said that was so you. And she laughed. She goes, "Yeah, I'm not a good cook," sort of thing, And I talked to one woman and I said, "Did you just buy a car?" And she said, "Yeah." And I said, "Blue?" She said, "Yeah." And she said, "I asked him to help me pick the car. And when I saw that car, I knew that was the car I was supposed to have." I said, "Well, there you go. Now it really was him who guided you to that car."
I love that because that happens a lot where you just don't quite know, but to have that confirmation like that
Yeah,
really is awesome.
What we a lot of times write off to coincidences and, luck of the draw literally is our loved ones on the other side. Now, they can't tell us what to do, okay? But they can point us in the right direction. And the reason why they can't tell us what to do, and I've heard this over and over again, is that what they call the eternal light of love, or the beautiful one, forbids them. So, for instance, if you've lost, a loved one, let's say a mother, and, she watches you all the time, and, she goes, "Well, if he does this, this is going to happen. If he does this, this is what's going to happen," right? She can gently guide you or nudge you, but she can't interfere because it would interfere with the lessons you're supposed to learn from, having gone through that. Does that make sense?
Oh, totally, yeah. And it would be sort of a invasion on free will too, because ultimately we have to make the choice. Yeah.
Which so I've got that psychic medium part that knows that. Then I've got Vincent over here, who tells me, "Okay, your next step is." It's just like,
what do you do?
but it only has to do with Vincent. You know what I mean, or with Harold. He doesn't. Well, actually, there have been times when one time he said, "Look for this building because they're waiting for you." And then he drew something. His mother sent it to me. I was going through Indianapolis. I looked up and there was the building. And, I put off going there for like 2 weeks. And I went there and the guy literally was like, "Oh, I've been waiting for you." I'm like, "What do you mean you've been waiting for me?" Yeah.
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 Coincidence only goes so far, right?
Yeah. Especially with this young man,
Yeah.
Coincidence.
Sounds like we could do a whole show on Vincent alone, really.
Oh, actually,
He sounds connected.
major part of the book is about Vincent and his mom and all the things that they went through. At one point, he was freaking out. There were several times. This is over about a 5-6 month period. the time. He was freaking out, and I told her, you know, pour some salt into a bathtub, and I told her to put some other things in there, basil and whatnot. And so anyway, you know, she would do that, and then she'd get back on the computer and she would chat with me. And at one time she was doing something. I think she was just putting him in the bath, or she'd put him in the bath. And he was about 6 years old at the time. And I saw this beautiful vision of Vincent laying in a tub. Now I couldn't see, you know, I could see from his chest up, but there was somebody hovering over him. And I can't even describe to you what he looked like, although I could see him clearly at the time. But I just remember he looked so beautiful. And Vincent looked at him and said, "Who are you?" Excuse me. I always get emotional whenever I tell people this story. And he looked at him and said, "My name is Michael, and God sent me to protect you." And they had this great conversation. And, you know, again, I wasn't on the computer. I was waiting for Jane to get back on. And she got back on. I said, "Jane," and this is in the book again. I said, "Jane, I have to tell you what I just saw. I just saw somebody saying he was Michael. I believe he was Michael the Archangel. He was sent by God. And he told Vincent not to worry because he would protect him." And she was just like, "Wow." And I said, "What's Vincent doing now?" And she said, "He's singing." Wow. He went from being closed down and upset to singing. So, you know, it's just filled with stories like that. And I've had people write to me and say, you know, I didn't believe in demons, but now after reading your book, I do. And I tell them, you know, that's the point. If the devil is real, it means God is real. And, you know, God will win this whole thing. Mm-hmm. Not because of me. I'm just an unwilling participant.
Yeah, that's one of the things you often hear with, you know, even surprisingly from a lot of Christians, and because they'll say things like, you know, whether it's confusing up, you know, demons and aliens or whatever, and it's like they kind of focus on, you know, the demon aspect of it. But it's like, according to the Bible, there's twice as many good angels as there is bad angels. So, I mean, no matter what, you've got twice as many good, whether it's aliens, demons, or whatever, you've got twice as many good ones.
I think it's a third, apparently. You know.
So 2/3 are of the
2/3
light.
are good, and then the third goes away.
Yeah.
But, no, you're right. You know, but I think, like I said, especially in this day and age, you know, people want to be scared. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah. Like I was saying about the ghost story.
I'm sorry?
Yeah. Like I was saying about a ghost story. Everybody likes a spooky ghost story at the campfire type thing, you know, or to jump out and scare somebody.
Yeah, they wanted to get even spookier now, so they talk about demonic ghosts. It's just like, well, there's one friend of mine, his name is Kenneth, and he every once in a while will post something in addition to whatever I post. And I actually went to a, quote, Paranormal 101 class because I was invited by the instructor. And ironically enough, the next night she was going to do a class on demonology. And I said, okay, you know, but I won't bring the doll. She said, no, bring the doll. You know, they'd love to see it. So I brought the doll. I brought it out. They had their infrared things going and, you know, their recorders and their oviluses and all this other stuff. Anyway, all of them walked away, and none of them were the same after that. None of them, you know, wanted to have anything to do with the doll after that. But Kenneth, while, you know, she was doing the slideshow on demons and whatnot, started doing automatic writing. And he wasn't even aware he was doing automatic writing. And one of the things he wrote was, you know, I was old when your world was young. And, you know, he, you know, started blaspheming God and all this other stuff. And I actually have a video with his transcript up on YouTube. But, you know, recently, again, he he wrote to me and he told me something he had heard that, again, was only a thought in my mind, you know, and basically, I pray the rosary every day. And, you know, one of the things I pray for is literally to get this whole thing to stop. And he wrote to me and said, I just heard, tell him if he thinks that bitch can win, he's wrong. And I was just like, whoa, you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. But then again, Vincent wrote, you know, later, blue and white, well, white and blue will win, and Mary's portrayed in Catholicism as wearing white and blue. Mm. So, you know, it's crazy.
So the story's continuing on here.
Oh, to this day.
Wow.
Literally to this day. Something's, you know, seems like every day something's happening. And, you know, right now I'm just trying to focus in on the big picture. I don't know where this will end. I don't know how this will end. I just know it will end. And until it does end, you know, I won't die, which probably means I might outlive Methuselah in the Bible. So, you know, and I'm grateful for somebody like you know what I mean? You know, who's willing to listen to the story. And like I said, there's so much, and I know it was rather scattered, but I've lived with this damn thing so long. And, you know, like I said, I tell people, you know, you don't have to believe me, but there are a lot of other people who are willing, you know, to share their story. And then there are, you know, or 10 times as many people who said, oh, hell no, I'm not going to even, you know, I'm not going to think about the doll. I'm not going to talk about the doll because I'm afraid of what will happen if I do. So, you know,
it can be kind of spooky though. Yeah, especially when you hear these other stories of people that doubted it, and then, you know, it's just this air of fear around it just to even say anything, you know.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I've had skeptics, you know, who said things, and then, you know, they'll like challenge the doll, and, you know, this doesn't happen all the time, and, you know, but then I'll never hear from them again. It's like, you know what I mean? I'll see post after post, you're a liar, you're this, you're an idiot, you know, you're confused, you're wrong, right? And it's like, I challenged it all, nothing happened to me. And then it's like, well, where are you? Yeah. I've had some, quote, reputable demonologists, okay? People have, you know, claimed to be demonologists, lay demonologists. But it's like, here's the book, read the book, and then you decide. I never hear from him again. You know, The best anybody's ever done is to say, I'll pray for you, after he became familiar with the story. I went and saw a priest and laid out all the evidence for him that I had at the time. And you could just see his face go from skepticism to fear. And it was funny because he says, well, what are you going to do? And I said, well, I'm going to, you know, continue trying to find out, you know, what I need to do to stop this thing. And my friend Donna was with me at the time. This was in Massachusetts. And she says, very innocently, while he's doing his research, can he leave the doll here at the church? Right? And the priest all of a sudden went, no!
Take it with you, huh?
Exactly. He went from solid skeptic to all of a sudden going, oh my God. You know, especially when I showed him this. Right? And you picked up on it, that, you know, straight out of the Revelations, right?
Yeah, definitely.
You know, he was like, so? And I said, so? He goes, yeah, who's that? And I quoted in the verse, and all of a sudden, all the blood left his face. You know, I said, he was 6 years old when he wrote that. So
there's some scary stuff, though, you know?
Yeah,
I can see how people get fearful of it. I mean, I've been in, like, you know, you go in your grandma's room, she's got all these porcelain dolls everywhere.
Yeah.
And, you know, you have to kind of push it out of your mind, or it can kind of creep you out if you're like, it's the spare bedroom and you're sleeping in it, and, you know, you got all these little faces looking at you. So I can completely get it. But at the same time, I think, you know, a lot of people can put so much of that, we're creator beings, I think, and we have this
Right.
potential power that it's like the whole placebo effect. It's like you put
Yeah.
enough power into something, you'll start seeing results.
Oh, I agree wholeheartedly. Like I said, I talk about that in my book. And how I did not want people to know the stories as they were coming up, because I did not want them to create, an entity that wasn't there, especially when I didn't know what the hell was going on. I wrote the book after, Vincent was helped by the two priests. And I end the book, spoiler alert, by saying that he immediately became very social. In fact, after the two priests left, he went next door and played with the kids next door, something he had never done. I can say that his grades improved in school. He became more social. In fact, at one point he won an award because somebody hurt themselves on the playground and all the kids ran to get, a teacher, and he remained behind with the young boy, with his classmate, until the teacher came. So they gave him an award for that, because so totally against the autistic, nature of him. But he went up to his mother, and this is how I end the book. And he told his mother that, paraphrasing, because of the two superhero old dudes, the black thing couldn't hurt him anymore, but now it wants to hurt Uncle Ant. And, after she wrote that, and actually after I wrote the book, before I wrote the book, I should say, I started noticing all kinds of crazy things. Like, he drew a picture of the hotel I was staying at and drew the black thing hovering over the hotel. He knew the name of one of the guests and what floor he lived on, and then sent me another picture of the room that the guy stayed in with the black thing hovering over that room.
Black thing kind of reminds me of the what was that show called, Stranger Things? The black thing that's in the sky. Did you ever see that show?
No.
It looks like it, the artwork of it, because it kind of had this octopus look
really?
to it, Yeah, it's interesting that it was from the upside down world. So the whole time I'm like,
Inception too. There was something like that, huh? Oh wait, not Inception. Insidious.
Insidious.
Yeah.
I can't really remember that one. But yeah, I thought that was interesting because
Stranger Things.
Stranger Things. It's you can see it on Netflix, but in the show there's an upside down version of everything, and it's sort of this inverted reality, and it's like the negative, and that's where you can see this thing that looks like what's in your drawing. So definitely weird. When I saw it, I was like, oh my gosh, it's like like Stranger Things looking.
Yeah, I mean, I have tons of drawings where he drew this sort of thing.
Yeah.
Trying to get the glare.
See how it kind of looks like an octopus, sort of smoky?
Yeah.
That's what it looks like in the show. It's really weird.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, I just got to say real quick, like, I had all that stuff happen with Devin when I was, like, binge watching that. And then, I also, this is something I haven't told anybody, but, I have the little Michael Jackson connection that everyone knows. Well, I felt drawn to Harold, and I wanted to, like, fix him, help him, put clothes on and all that. And so I, like, kind of, I don't know, was asking in my mind if he was good or bad. And I had a very vivid dream of Harold, like, laying on his back, floating by, like, my field of vision. And he was saying lyrics, one of Michael Jackson's songs, and he was saying, I'm bad, you know what, I'm bad. And then...
When was this? Tonight?
This was when I was watching the video, after I watched all your videos back then. And then I just have to say, like, to sum it up, like, I revisited this today because I wanted to share your story with everybody. And I was thinking about it. So, well, like last night, I had a really bad headache all night long, and then the computer crashed right before I got on here, and I just can't deny some of those things that you've said that have happened to other people, and then Devin getting that big old rash. And I don't know. It's just interesting,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I hope that Harold and you know, anything that's attached to the doll, do find peace or, you know, whatever it is that they're looking for. And
well, you know, what I wanted to say to you, Sherry, don't get too wrapped up in this thing, because I've had people who get very wrapped up in it and nothing good comes from it.
yeah.
And, you know, like I said, I can't even begin to tell you how many friends I've lost who, you know, it's crazy. In Team Harold, I wrote some of the things that have been going on recently and some of the discoveries I've made, you know, which in my mind were making strides to finding out, you know, how to stop this thing. And one of the members wrote, "Poor Harold." And I was talking to her on the phone, and I said, "I just curious, why did you say that?" And she said, "Say what?" And I said, "Why did you write Poor Harold?" And she said, "I did?" I said, "Yeah, it's still up there." And she had to go look. And she said, "You know, while I was reading that, I remember hearing in my mind, 'Poor Harold,' but I don't remember writing it."
Wow.
So I've had a ton of people who have literally turned against me and said the most malicious things about me. And then later on, you know, they'll reach out to me, and even though it's in writing, you know what I'm saying? I have screenshots. They'll say, "I never wrote that. I don't remember writing that." You know, and again, these are friends of mine who, after that, will all of a sudden not be friends of mine anymore, because it just scares them even more, you know, when they realize that they said things that they didn't even realize they had said.
Yeah, and we've actually talked about this. Sherry and I have talked about this. How it seems like, you know, there's maybe a positive and a negative force out there that can use people at times. Like, you know, whether it be just to write something or maybe to whisper in their ear, and
Yeah.
it can be something encouraging someone else, or it could be, you know, because
Yeah.
I've had people come to me and say, you know, when you said that, that really meant a lot to me. But at the same time, it seems like people can say things they don't really mean much to them, but to that person, it kind of freaks them out because maybe it synchronistically aligns with something in their life, and it means a lot more than the person that originally said that to them. So I think, you know, it's something to be aware of, that, you know, not to be absent-minded and to sort of be in the moment and in control, because maybe you know, that old saying, the idle mind is the devil's playground thing, you know what I mean? Like, if you're not in control, it's something.
Well, not to bring religion into it, but I do believe in the Holy Spirit, and I do believe the Holy Spirit, you know, does speak through us to inspire people who, you know, need to hear what you had to say.
Definitely.
I've said things, you know, as a medium or whatnot, and somebody would come up to me and say, "Oh, when you said that, it meant so much to me." And it's just like, I didn't say that, kind of thing.
Yeah.
You know, I don't remember saying that. And so,
Yeah.
you know, and you're right. You know, you can't slice north, you know, so thin that there's no south. You know, there's no east without a west. There's no good without evil.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I'm dealing with evil with a capital E.
It's exciting though, right? Never a dull moment.
Well, you know, my first response that went through my head is like, well, I'll give them to you, and you can tell me how exciting it is. But,
No,
I like you too much. I can't think of anybody, and I've literally sat down and thought about this. Who do I dislike? Because I don't like using the word hate. Right. Who do I dislike enough, you know,
to the doll,
to hand him over, right? And I just, you know, I just can't think of anybody I dislike enough, you know, to make my headache their headache.
Yeah.
So, you know, I do believe that this will end, though. I honestly do, Shane and Sherry. I do believe this will end. I don't know how it will end. And, you know, I don't know. You two might be the first one.
Well, that's what I was going to say. You'll have to keep us updated, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
we don't want the doll, but we'll have you back on the report about it, but we don't want it. or at least I don't. Sherry might want it.
No,
Play dress up.
I felt sorry for it, you know.
Well, you know what? That happens a lot. I hear that from a lot of people who end up regretting, like my friend Tanya. Her life became a literal nightmare, and she wanted to hold the doll, and I said, no, don't even touch it. And, you know, she was so drawn to the doll. Lori in Long Island was drawn to the doll. My friend Camille was drawn to the doll. And when I was going to make actually when I was going to send proof to the young lady in England that I owned the doll, and I said, you know, I might even go ahead and make some of my own videos about it because, you know, there's so much nonsense and so much crap out there about the doll. And she's like, oh, that's a good idea. And I literally was going to the storage unit to pull the doll out to take a picture of it to send to the girl in England when Camille told me that, oh, that's a good idea. And again, she felt sorry for the doll. She was drawn to the doll. And a little bit later on, I heard a voice say, you know, she'd better stay away from me. I didn't think anything of it, pulled the doll out, took pictures, sent them to the girl in England, was sitting down for a cup of coffee at Starbucks, which was across from my hotel. And all of a sudden I thought about, you know, that she'd better stay away from me. So I gave her a call. She answered the phone and I said, are you okay? Because I could tell something was wrong. And she said, no, I'm sick. And I said, what's wrong? She says, I keep getting chills and fever. It just keeps going back and forth. I said, well, how long has this been going on? She said, right after I hung up the phone with you, you know, earlier. So I said, I'll call you back. And this is when I discovered it, responded to religious provocation. Went back to my hotel, grabbed the holy water, started spraying the damn doll with it, and said, don't you ever attack anyone I love or any one of my friends ever again. And about 5 minutes later, I heard, okay, she's okay now. I called her up. She was back to her normal, cheerful self.
Wow. That's wild stuff, man.
It is. Now she won't, I mean, I got her to do a film with the doll, and she told me later on it gave her a huge headache. But, you know, she, amongst other people, in fact, I have a video on there. I don't remember which one it is. We see the doll's eyes turning color. Mm-hmm. And then I have another video where I'm talking, and, you know, I didn't notice it because I just make the video, I put it up, and people were writing me saying, did you notice the doll was imitating you as you talked? And I looked at it, and sure, as I was talking, you could see the doll's lips apparently moving.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, we were looking earlier, and I saw an orb fly right from the doll across the horned character on one of the videos you did when it was showing the doll there, and that picture, that blue and black picture with the horned character, and you could see an orb fly right back.
A lot of them have orbs in them. A lot of the pictures have.
Yeah, a lot of them have orbs. And in fact, a lot of times I'll be sitting at my desk, and I'll see orbs flying by. One of my dogs, Chance, in fact, Chance and Bentley, who both, Chance died from mysterious, I'll put it, causes. The vets couldn't figure it out, what happened to him. When I first, I'd had Harold with me, and then I got Chance, and I literally would take him out for a walk, and when we'd come back, I'd open the door, and I would have to either pull the dog in or pick him up and carry him in to the room. And, you know, this happened for about 2 weeks, and I couldn't figure out what was going on. It was like, oh, of course. So I said, Harold, Chance is, you know, part of the family now, so you got to quit scaring him. And, you know, you need to be nice and treat him nice, because at one point I took a picture of him and there were orbs all over. And this was in my hotel room. And, you know, next time I took Chance out, brought him back in, he just came trotting on into the room. Never had a problem after that.
That's wild. Wow. So, and you didn't need the holy water that time. You just knew what was in store, right? Yeah. That's crazy. Yeah, well, your mom, Sandy, is actually saying that you cannot have the doll. You stay at her place too much, and she does not want that thing in her.
Well, speaking of holy water,
We've already gotten rid of dolls over here before, so.
I keep this next to my bed. This is about up to here with holy water.
Oh, okay.
And then I have another bottle of holy water.
Well, I really appreciate you coming on and sharing the story, and I expect to get updated with him and also have you back on to discuss some of this other mediumship and stuff that you do. Because you've written up 3 other books before this latest work, right? 2
more coming out. So, one about the doll and another one about the afterlife. So, I'm actually a best-selling author.
Right.
What that means exactly, I don't know.
Right.
Because, if I'm going to write books for money, I think I got to start writing ransom notes. But I wanted to say, by the way, in closing, that if anybody watches this for whatever reason, has something they think is, caused by the entity or, let's say by Harold, they can contact me on Messenger, Facebook Messenger, or through my email address, anthony.quinata, Quinata, @hotmail.com. And typically I can put it, an end to it from this end.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, someone actually in the chat was wanting to get a hold of you, so let's see, you get that. Okay, awesome.
Thank you so much, Anthony, for coming.
Yeah.
Sherry, thank you for the invitation. Shane, you were awesome. Thank you for, hearing me out. I know, like I said, I know we went long, and there's so much more I could tell you. I mean, because I live with this damn thing every day now. So.
But we do have the book link below, so anyone interested in hearing more about Harold and your experiences with it, that's definitely paranormal. And they can follow that link or go to your website, or if they want to see more videos, they can go to your YouTube channel. We have that link below as well.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, the videos are interesting.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Sherry, for getting Anthony here, and thank you for taking the time to come on, Anthony.
My pleasure.
Lots of love to you guys in the chat, and we'll see you on the next one. Have a good one, you guys.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
If you'd like to support the work I do, go to paypal.me/UOTF. Thanks.